Well, introduction to me. My name's Jeffrey Lewis. I live in New York City. I make songs, I make comic books, and I have a new album coming out March 21st, 2025. So I have a number of tours coming up, and that's what's going on from my end of things.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. This is the sort of annual, not entirely annual, Lewis family event in which myself and various family members gather and just do what we do. There's many.
By the time I started playing at Sidewalk, I first started playing the open mic there in 1998 when I first started making up songs, and I had never heard of anti-folk, even though it was right here in my neighborhood. It was just such a small little self-contained scene. I don't think I had ever heard that word before, but they had a fanzine, and they had all these people that were doing stuff that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to just hang out there all the time, and I would always sketch the performers. I would bring my sketchbook and do sketches of the people playing, and I was starting to make up my own songs, and I was in my early 20s at that time, and it was just this interesting thing to participate in and be a part of.
Time flows like an hour, I'll be a man tomorrow, the world is goodbye, cause there ain't no on the TV now.
Me and my brother Jack played the show at Sidewalk, and we're just selling this tape of our songs. And it just kind of went from there. I'd sort of made another tape of songs the following year, and kind of about once a year, all the songs that I've been writing, I would kind of compile onto one cassette. And it was very cheap to manufacture these cassettes. I would just sell them for $3, and I was always drawing comic books, so I would always have a little folded comic book that came with the tape. I was one of the last people to switch to doing CDs. At that time, everybody was kind of making CDRs, really, in the early 2000s. And I was still just doing this cassette thing. Daniel Johnston was just my biggest guiding light, and that was what Daniel had done, just record his songs directly onto tape. I just thought that was the most direct thing to do. I was just so blown away by the existence of Daniel Johnston, and everything that he did just was so inspirational to me. I wouldn't have even started making songs if I hadn't heard his stuff. So I really owe him everything from the beginning up till now.
Pancho Villa.
The Moldy Peaches started playing at Sidewalk, and they got signed to Rough Trade Records in England. People in England were really excited about what is this stuff going on in New York City. And so the record label asked the Moldy Peaches, well, who else is playing in New York City that is worth checking out? And lucky for me, they recommended my stuff. I just got this message from Rough Trade Records, which was is a very legit record label that put out a lot of albums that I had in my own collection.
2, 3, 4. I thought Rough Trade was like a little movie to tell their history, just like 24-hour party people did for Factory. That joke was more relevant 5 years ago. I also did this footage. I also did one for K Records in case Rough Trade drops me.
I couldn't believe that this record label was contacting me. I only had my little cassettes. You could call it my lucky break, even though it wasn't something that I was ever looking for or thinking about. I just put together some of the songs from my tapes. Rough Trade put that stuff out on a CD, and suddenly it was like, oh, I have this real CD out on a real record label that's out in the real world. That kind of took this huge leap from just these bedroom cassettes to having this weird stamp of legitimacy that I would never have gone for myself. I never would have had the thought of sending my stuff to record labels.
Well, unfortunately, that's not what she actually said. She really said something more like this.
I did grow up in a kind of hippie counterculture environment in which there was no television. My parents were just very disconnected from that kind of culture. There was no interest in having a television in the house. So for me, comic books was like my main source of entertainment as a kid, even when I was very, very little. Not only was I interested in reading comics, but I could, copy them, I could draw, I could make my own comics, my own characters, and that was a lot of how I had fun. I would just be sitting I didn't have a TV to watch or video games to play or any of that stuff. It was just by a force of circumstance. And then also just not having any money created a creative environment. So this idea of just making something based on what is immediately at hand was not something that I thought of as anything special. That was just how things went. And that, I suppose, developed into making my own comics and everything else.
Life is a story, don't you doubt? Bad times give you something to
It
talk
feels
about.
so good when I've made something that I feel excited about that I think of it as somebody who's addicted to playing a slot machine at a gambling casino in Las Vegas or something, and they just keep pulling the handle of the slot machine and spending their time and spending their quarters, and you lose 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 and you lose. But then when you hit, when that jackpot comes up, it feels so good, and it's just so validating to me to make something that I feel like I've done a good job on. I just continue pulling that handle, making one bad song after another bad song, after another bad drawing, after another bad drawing. It's all because I somehow have this belief that if I just keep on failing, there'll be some reward at the end of it where it'll have been worth it, because those rewards, when I make stuff that I feel good about, it just is such a high. It's just such a, I just feel so exuberant about it. I try going to an open mic once a week, and that's a great little interaction right there. It keeps me creating. It's like, can I write something that is gonna make me feel proud of getting up in front of a room full of strangers and they're all playing their songs, and how can I participate in this creative process on a regular basis? It's very humbling, because just because I've done all this stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that the song I make up this week is going to be any better than anybody else who's playing that open mic. It's just an endless challenge.